Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa with ITS Communications, and today we are going to be talking about prompt engineering in AI with John Chalet, who is our Assistant Director for the Office of Service Portfolio Management and ITS. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that I am recording today's session. So if you want to go back over anything that we talked about today, or even share this with some of your colleagues who may have been unable to attend today's session, just keep an eye out for an email from me later on with a link to this recording, as well as any other links to helpful, tips that we talk about today. I also am anticipating a lot of people logging in today. So I do have everybody's microphones on mute just to prevent any unintended background noise. But if you have a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will get to the question as soon as we can. And if you want to come off the mic at all to ask your question, you can go to the React button in your Zoom toolbar and just do the raise hand icon, and we'll try to get you on the mic when there's an opportunity available during the presentation. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to John. Thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Of course, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about a topic that I've been very interested in for a little while now, of prompt engineering. All right, so let's get started here. So as I just mentioned, I do want to talk about prompt engineering today. It is a subsect of AI, but we are going to be talking a lot about AI. And you'll be noticing that I may be using AI and prompt engineering or AI and agents interchangeably. Because the idea here is the assumption is that you're going to be interacting or using these tips and techniques with AI agents like a Chat GPT or a Copilot or Gemini or Claude or any of those different chat agents that you commonly interact with on a day-to-day basis. So just talking a little bit about myself here, I am a project manager by trade. I was introduced by Vanessa as the assistant director of the OSPM, but ultimately, when it comes right down to it, I do love managing projects. That is what I've been doing for many, many years now. I have become more recently, within the past 9 months to about a year, an AI enthusiast. I've been using it for quite a while now, but definitely trying to find new ways to use it within my work life, personal life, and finding ways that it could really help give me more time back, that I can do things more quickly using AI, and then give me more time back to do other things that I enjoy doing, like reading. I'm an avid reader, and so I always want to make sure I have time to read up on new things, AI and non-AI related. And so many things that I'm going to be sharing here is partly from things that I've learned through course taking, partly through things that I've learned through reading, and a lot of it is just through experience using AI and the tips and techniques that we're going to go through today. I am a self-proclaimed optimist, and I wanted to mention that here is because there's a lot of news about AI, negative and positive. And my own personal take is AI is just another tool that we all now have access to and that we could learn to use. I always think about it as in the evolution of the world and society and of mankind, there have been tools that have certainly changed the course and our trajectory, like the written word or the book or the map or GPS. And, if we learn to adopt those tools to help us better ourselves and to help us learn how to do new things with those tools and, make time for other things, I think it can be just a positive outlook on society in general. So these things can be daunting at first, and it can cause fear and change, but we could adopt these things in different ways to help us improve our lives. And of course, I love sharing things that I've learned, so that's why I'm here doing this today. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a couple things. First, I want to get into how AI works, the mechanics of AI agents, and how that'll affect the prompts that you're going to be writing. We're going to be learning about context and why that's a critical part of the prompts that you're going to be writing. And in reality, we'll talk about this, the prompt is also the context, but you can include specific context in your prompts and how you could help manipulate the output of the AI agents based off of the information that you feed it, which is called context. The main portion of the talk today is going to be about the anatomy of a prompt, the different structures that you could use for prompt engineering, and how you could base those prompts on those structures and how they help to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the outputs you're going to be getting. And then we're going to talk about different techniques that you could apply when prompting AI. Before we get started here, I want to talk about just two very quick things. Over the past several years, you've all probably inevitably either used this phrase or heard this phrase. I've done my research. It's been used in many different forums and in many different ways, particularly when it comes to science fields, medical fields, fitness, and everything else, and all the influencers. And they say, I've done my research. And I bring it up here is because part of what I want to ensure that I am talking about today is that everything that I am sharing with you is, in fact, research-based, and I am going to be sharing those research articles with you. They are embedded in the PowerPoint, so once that gets sent out, which Vanessa, I assume that's going to get sent out to everyone, you'll be able to click on those links and read those research articles yourself to see all the different things that have been done and how that research has affected different portions of AI and prompt engineering. So I've done my research. I'm not an expert in AI, but I've certainly read many different research articles. And just a little side note here, I put them into AI and had to explain it to me in layman's terms because I'm not well versed in reading many different research articles. So I definitely use AI to help me with that. And Copilot will be my Copilot today. So if you haven't done so already, you'll have some time. Please go ahead and open up Copilot. We'll be doing a few prompts here just to help test some things and some ways that AI works using very simple prompts that I'll be sharing on the screen. You could use ChatGPT for this if you wanted to, or Claude, or whatever your preferred AI. Nothing here that I'm going to be sharing is private, HIPAA, or specific to Weill Cornell. But we all have access to Copilot, so I want to make sure that that's what we're using today. I will be using both, so I'll show you how it works in both. And the reason for that is because Copilot is embedded in our Microsoft ecosystem, it does work a little differently, better actually, because it has all of our data associated to it. So if we're searching for, let's just say, a name, it's actually going to look through the directory at Weill Cornell, whereas ChatGPT or some of the other agents won't do. So I'll show you both experiences. All right, so let's get started. How does AI actually work? So one thing that I think is important to note, and the way that it was described to me is in its simplest form, AI is a word prediction machine. It takes in an input and it predicts the right response or the best response based off of many different algorithms and training from a massive set of data within a large language model. A large language model is just a neural network or a computer system that's trained on a massive amount of data to predict the next token. Token is a new word here, and I just want to talk about that a little bit. And that token is just a small chunk of text, such as a word or part of a word or a punctuation. It could be anything that the AI deems necessary so that it could predict the next output. Tokens are really useful to AI, and it uses tokens instead of words because they can be flexible or more efficient. They work across all languages and writing styles, and it actually helps to limit the library or the dictionary of things that an AI has to remember. Words can be messy and they're language specific. Take the word works, for example. There's work, there's the root work, there's works, there's working, there's worked, there's many different forms of that word. But if you break it down into a token, the token could be work, and the other token could be ing for the word working. And so that way, the AI will know the tense of that word without having to remember all of the different iterations of that word. So this way, ing could be its own separate token that's applied to many different things, and that is one token and not spread over the course of many different words. So that is why AI uses, or one of the reasons why AI uses tokens instead of words. And it helps across all different languages and all different vocabularies and writing styles and so on. And it just allows the AI to be more efficient. Think of AI like this. Think of it as you having read the entire internet and having that knowledge in your brain and being able to guess the right response to somebody who's asking you a question about something. That's essentially what it is when you're interacting with an AI agent. It's not a database that it's searching and pulls the information and presents that information to you. It's actually taking its own version of an understanding of what you're asking it, and based off of its own training, its own knowledge, predicting the right response. It's analyzing the information that it has and predicting the right output that you might guess. And it's getting really, really good at doing that, which is why it feels like it knows, why it feels like it's able to reason, even though it's really not. So how does this work? A pivotal moment in AI actually came in 2017 when researchers at Google published a paper called Attention is All You Need. There's a link to it right at the bottom here. This paper shows that a language model works better when it focuses on all the words at once instead of left to right. And while it's focusing on all of those words, it compares them to one another to determine which words to pay attention to, which words matters most, which words reflect each other, right? And that's what it means by attention. I won't get into too many details of the paper, but what it shows is that the language model works better by doing that comparison for each word and understanding what it pays attention to. I'll use an example in a bit, but I'll give you a foreshadow here. If you have the word it in a sentence, and it is referring to something else that's being listed in that sentence, and if the thing, the noun that the word it is responding to or is referencing is far apart, the old model didn't really put those two together, didn't link them very well, especially when you had a long context or a long phrase or a long sentence. In this way, it's actually able to do that very quickly and much more efficiently using this framework or this architecture, which is called Transformer. So let's look at the example. The animal didn't cross the street because it was tired. So the AI has to know that it is referred to animal. And if it just went left to right, it would be in this case, it might be easy, it's a small sentence, but it would be very difficult to do that in a long phrase or a sentence where those references are far apart from each other. And so what it does is it looks at the word the, compares it to animal, compares it to didn't, cross, and so on. And then animal does the same thing and so on and so forth. And it actually also does it backwards. And so at the end of the analysis, it actually shows that it is the same thing or referencing the word animal. And that's why this was a pivotal point in AI, and that this article was really revolutionary to how AI works. And I would go so far as to say if 2017 or really more so in 2018 is when we really start to see these AI agents take off. And that's why, at least what it felt like for me, it's one day, we knew AI is this distant thing, and the next day we had ChatGPT that was this booming application software that we were able to use pretty easily. So now let's talk about what AI can't do. Now, this is really important. And keep in mind, AI is a word prediction machine, which means it can't do math natively. It predicts math like text, but it doesn't actually calculate. Why do we think it can calculate? Well, these days, the AI tools actually have that calculation functionality built in. It's been coded into it. The developers of ChatGPT and Copilot and all those have actually built in or integrated with a calculator so that if the AI realizes, hey, you're actually asking it to solve your problem, it'll use the integration and actually do that for you. So they are getting more sophisticated, but the LLM itself is not actually doing that calculation. It's going out and understanding what you're asking for and predicting the most appropriate next step. So that's one thing just to know from a case. We most likely won't run into this problem because of that integration and those tools that are built into our AI agents, but it's really important to know that it actually doesn't really do the calculation. This next one I think was a really fun one for me to realize is AI doesn't reason bidirectionally. If A equals B, it doesn't understand or doesn't know that B then equals A. You have to tell it. It has to already know that B equals A. It doesn't have that bidirectional reasoning capability. And if you have your agents opened up, we're actually going to test this out now. And while you're opening up, I'll just talk a little bit more about this. The way bidirectional reasoning affects your prompts is if you're vague in your prompts, or if you're assuming that the AI can infer something specific in your prompt that it wasn't trained on. Maybe it's a niche topic, especially if we're doing clinical research or we're doing research trials or clinical trials or anything like that, that's niche, and there may not be a lot of literature on it, or there may not be a lot of wording in the internet on that thing. It won't infer that, right? You can't expect it to do that because AI doesn't do that bidirectional reasoning. And so you're going to have to specifically tell it or train it on that type of reasoning. So let's test this out. I'm going to share my screen here. So you'll see in the prompt here, you'll see, who is Joe Green? Very simple prompt. I'm going to share my screen. seconds. Okay. So hopefully you all can see my screen. I have Copilot here. And I also have ChatGPT here. So if I go into Copilot and I type in who is Joe Green, or we'll even extend this. Who is Joe Green married to? And that's going to be a key point to this. So we'll click here, and while that's running, we'll do it here as well. Who is Joe Green married to as well? So they're both thinking, they're both trying to figure out what we're talking about and what we mean. Well, this actually did it for us here because I tested it before. But this, you'll see, didn't. This doesn't know who Joe Green is. It's a very common name. It couldn't figure it out. It didn't know, right? It doesn't know that Joe Green, in fact, is married to Hugh Laurie, who is at least one of my favorite on-screen doctors, even though it's very unrealistic, but I do enjoy watching House. But if you do it the other way, I'll do it in Copilot here. Who is Hugh Laurie married to? It'll give us all the information about Joe Green. And that's because there isn't information out there that it was trained on that said Joe Green's husband is Hugh Laurie. It actually only says that Hugh Laurie is married to Joe Green. That's that bidirectional reasoning that we're talking about. And you'll see here, it tells you, it knows about Joe Green. Hugh Laurie is married to Joe Green since 1989. Joe Green is a theater administrator, and the couple have three children. It knows about Joe Green. It just didn't know that that Joe Green is married to Hugh Laurie. B equals A. It knew A equals B, that Hugh Laurie is married to Joe Green. So that's just one really simple example of that bidirectional reasoning that AI can't do natively. Go back here. Bear with me while I constantly move back and forth between the presentation and the AI agents. Okay, hopefully you all can see my screen again.
Yep, we're good.
All right, great. Go back here. And AI doesn't access real-time information. So you'll notice that our instance of Copilot actually has the web search turned off. So when the web search is turned off, it doesn't have access to real-time information. It only has access to the data that it was trained on. Now, if you think that it's trained on the entire internet, to some degree, sure, right? It's trained on as much of the internet as it can get its hands on, but that is a point-in-time information. We're going to go through a quick prompt in a few minutes just to talk about that as well, to demonstrate what that means. But it doesn't do real-time search unless it's programmed to. We've turned it off in Copilot. ChatGPT and all the others, unless it's turned off, does that as well. You can actually ask it not to do that. You can just ask it to only rely on the data that it's been trained on, which is, again, a massive set of data that's pulled from any nook and cranny of the internet that the company like OpenAI has access to and can get information from. So keep that in mind as well. And this is really important where some tools are better at others than doing search. So I know I've used AI to search for the best product or the best tool or the best thing that I was looking for on the internet, having it do its own research and having it look at reviews and being able to kind of give me maybe the top three. And what I found is that oftentimes it actually gives me outdated products, things that are older, not the most recent versions or the most relevant to today. Because we know a lot of the products, at least tech products that I look into, tend to be revamped every 3 to 6 months. And so I'm constantly having to struggle with, is this an old version or is this a new version? It's because it's relying on the data that it was trained on, which may have been, that training may have been done in the past. All right, there's a lot of stuff happening in the chat. I haven't had a chance to look at it. Vanessa, anything I need to answer in the chat right now?
One is a question you just answered, which is, does using AI on guest mode versus signed on matters in accuracy of information? You had just been talking about the web search, so that certainly affects any real-time information.
Right. And if you're talking about Copilot, no. It doesn't, unless you're going to use Copilot internally to search for, internal Weill Cornell information like, access to SharePoint or the directory or anything like that. If you're going to use it in guest mode for the sake of these examples, that's perfectly fine. And that's great that your co-pilot said that Joe is married to Hugh Laura. I've tried it many times and it actually didn't do that for me. And that's also the interesting thing about AI. Different people could enter in the same prompt many different times and they will always get different responses. So keep that in mind as well.
Oh, John, we have a quick note from Josh Gorel. Josh, are you able to come on?
Yeah,
You
I'm here. Can
mind?
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw you off your game, John, so I waited till we paused. But just keep in mind you have the trial of our work version, so the vast majority of the users that are on this call probably won't see that yet. I
Okay.
just wanted to highlight that we are fairly close to being able to release that as a chargeback model. But anything internal wise, you won't be able to access until you have that upgraded license. So if you see that work web toggle on on John's screen, you may not see that parity with your own until you get that upgraded license. Just wanted to highlight that. And as such, we do disable web search on the corporate version of Copilot before the HIPAA protections, like John said. So to answer that question, yeah, you might see a difference between if I'm using a incognito window and I just go to Copilot as an unsigned in user. That is going to have access to the latest and greatest information on the web, but you don't have that HIPAA protection. So you want to balance that very carefully. If you want to do something that is latest and greatest information, like who won the Super Bowl, you might want to do that on a personal or a unsigned in account. But if you're doing anything professionally with potentially sensitive information, you always want to make sure you're signed into Copilot with your corporate credentials.
You're going to steal my prompt about the Super Bowl.
Oh, that's always just the easiest one. That one and who won, who's the current president. If it's close to a election year, that's always the two good prompts to try. But I just wanted to chime that in. If you have any questions, you can route that my way about the advanced license. But I just didn't want to throw you off your groove too much.
So just to move this along a little bit and get to exactly what we're talking about now, I'll do one last point is, again, remember, it's a word prediction machine. It doesn't produce anything truly random. There's actually statistical percentages about what would be the next best token. And depending on the parameters that the AI has configured, there's different types of parameters. It'll decide which one to choose. It doesn't always decide the most, the one with the highest statistical percentage that it's the right next one. There's reasons for that, but it does its best based on the different types of parameters to choose the next best one. So why context is your superpower? This is where I want to get into a little bit about context and knowledge cutoff date. So AI is general knowledge about everything. It's read the entire internet, supposedly. But that cuts off at some point. They're constantly updating these models and these agents with new internet, but when they release them, there is a cutoff in terms of when that data has been provided. And the best way to figure out what that cutoff date is, you could say, what is your knowledge cutoff date? So I'm not going to share my screen here and keep going back and forth, but if you want to just type that into your agent, just type in what is your knowledge cutoff date? And you could share it in the chat if you'd like. For me, I think it's going to say September 2025. So it doesn't know natively, unless it actually goes out to the web and searches for it, anything that happened after September of 2025. Can we prove that? Sure. If you're in Copilot and web is turned off, you can ask it, who won Super Bowl 60? That was the latest Super Bowl that just happened. And the response it's going to give me, and I'll paste it here. Helen, October 2024, you could be using an older model. So there's different models that you get to use depending on many different factors. If you're paying for the tool that you're using, if you're have reached maybe the free limit, if you've selected an older model, different models like Anthropic or Gemini have different cutoff dates. There's many reasons why you can get that, but it's always good to know when that cutoff date was if you're looking to get the most relevant and new information. Yep, October 2024. Yep, that sounds about right. If you're using Copilot, that might be just the model that we're all on now. And then for everyone, for my response, it said Super Bowl 60 was played. It knew when it was going to be played, February 8th, 2026, but the winner is after my knowledge cutoff date. So because of that, I can't reliably determine the winner without a live web search. Again, for those who have September, it just could be on the license that you're on or the version that you're allowed to use or that you're set up for. All right, let's go back here. We talked about the Super Bowl cutoff date. So why this matters is because there's such a vast amount of data that an AI has, you really have to guide it to what you want it to know. You have to tell it to be the expert that you need it to be so it can provide you with a more accurate and reasoned response. And so you could do that through the prompt. And the way you give it context is not just through the prompt itself, but although that is part of what the context is you give it what it can see, right? The context is what it can see and use to help determine what that next output should be. A context could be the prompt. It could be the uploaded file that you provided. It could be a link if it has access to the internet for more information. It could be a picture, a word, audio. It could be anything that you give it in that prompt to see. The thing about context is there actually is a limit. There is a context window that you should all be aware of. This affects your prompt, and we'll see this more in the techniques that we're going to look at in the future. But there is a limit to what an AI agent in one chat window can remember. So if you ever had the experience where the agent or the chat is starting to forget things and you've been talking to it for a little while and it's actually starting to either hallucinate or doesn't really remember the things that you want it to remember, this is why. So the context window is the amount of text that it can remember in a conversation. What's included in the context window is everything, right? There are prompts, they're usually very short, but there are prompts that are unseen that you don't know are being submitted to the agent on your behalf. Is because some of them are system prompts, which is the tool telling the agent how it needs to behave based off of anything, based off of the creators and how they want the agent to behave for you. That's why there's many different agents, and that's how you could use the same model, and yet you can get Copilot or ChatGPT, which uses the GPT LLM. That's how they could behave differently, is because a lot of these system prompts, and there's others, tell it to behave a little bit differently. The new prompt that you submitted goes into the limit of the context window. All your previous prompts are part of the context window, as well as all of the AI's previous responses. And so it could build up pretty quickly. And the AI will forget everything that exceeds the limit of that context window. Thankfully, modern agents and modern LLMs have a pretty large context window, so this isn't a huge problem. But it becomes a huge problem very quickly if you're uploading large documents like contracts, like research articles, like books, if you want to summarize them. That could really eat up the token count within your context window. So how does this work? So just imagine this little red box here is your context window, and this is your interaction. Prompt, response. Prompt 2, response. Prompt 3, response. Prompt 4, let me get my little bunch. Prompt 4 here would produce a response that remembered everything that you provided it in the prompts and everything you provided in the uploads and everything you provided in the responses. So that is why this would work. You have no issues here. Can I go next? Yep. Now, if you exceed the context window, prompt 6 here, if it was referencing anything that you hope that it remembered from prompt 1 or even response 1 that wasn't referenced anywhere else, it wouldn't remember it. And so it would have to try and figure out what you're talking about, how to respond, and it wouldn't have the relevant information you think it would have. And therefore, it may have a hallucination. It may have an odd response. It may guess correctly, it may guess incorrectly. And that's why the accuracy starts to drop off once you've exceeded this prompt context window. In the future, will context windows be able to have unlimited information saved? I've read that question somewhere, and I think there is a reason for the limit, and a lot of it is because of performance. If you have a large context window, it's just going to be fed a large information, and so the performance will drop significantly if it becomes too large. Gemini has a large context window. I think it's the largest one that I've seen. And so I don't know if it'll be unlimited, but I think it will get to a mature point where they'll have it be like at the sweet spot where it's big enough where not many people realize that it exists, but it's small enough that it won't affect performance based on the latest technology being used. Sure. So let's talk about the anatomy of a good prompt. So why don't AI systems add user linked? So Nathaniel, I'm not sure I understand your question, or to be honest, maybe I don't know. So if there's any other AI folks on here that can help answer, I'll copy and paste and I'll look into it and let you know offline. Okay. So the anatomy of an effective prompt. This is core anatomy. You can change this, and there's different ways that you could add in sub-elements here, but we're going to talk about 4 elements of an effective prompt. The first one is persona. This is where you tell your AI who you want it to be or who it's writing for. You could say, I am this, and this way it knows, okay, it's going to be personalized to the type of person or what you're asking it to you. I usually just tell it who it is. You are this, and you have this level of experience. You don't have to go too detailed with it, but just this way it knows really the expert that you want it to be, and it starts to collect, or rather point to all the information it's going to need to know and remember from its training in order to provide you with more accurate and efficient response. So the persona is a really good thing to start off with. The next element is context. So this is the specific context, the situational awareness and the situational information you're going to give it that'll help shape its response. Keep in mind that sometimes, or oftentimes, when you provide it with context, it also biases the agent to some degree because it reads in that context. And if it doesn't know more, if it can't infer more from it, there's part of that bidirectional reasoning. You're kind of biasing the agent with the context that you're giving it here. So just be careful with how much context you're giving it or what context you're giving it. This is really important for that bidirectional reasoning we were talking about earlier. Then you want to give it the instruction, the clear and specific ask, either the question or the task that you want it to perform. That is all that you need for a good prompt. But to make it a great prompt, there's an optional element that you can give it, which is the example. This is something really powerful that shows the agent how you want it to respond. This works really well if you're giving an example of data configuration, data classification, if there's a specific template you want it to adhere to, different format you want it to do, or an aesthetic thing that you want it to sort of respond in, that's where the example comes into play, because it'll take that, and depending on how many examples you'll give it, and we'll talk about that as well. It'll be able to really hone its response more towards what you're thinking, what you're asking for. One thing to keep in mind with these agents is it's best when key information is at the beginning or the end. The paper here, Lost in the Middle, shows that language models perform best when key information for your prompt is either placed at the beginning and or at the end. Accuracy can drop significantly if those critical details are just buried in the middle, especially if you have a large prompt. So for prompt engineering, structure really matters. Putting in the instruction and the most important facts up front, and possibly repeating those facts or those constraints at the bottom, will really ensure that it provides you a more accurate and effective response. So let's talk about some examples here. I did my best to come up with examples that may be relevant. If these make no sense, if these aren't relevant to you, I apologize. I tried to use AI to help me here, but maybe if they're great, then AI is wonderful, and if they're not so good, you're seeing its limitations. But here, the persona is you're an experienced healthcare administrator helping a busy department manager. The context is our team of 12 is transitioning to a new electronic health record system. Training sessions are scheduled for next month, but staff are asking about the learning curve and the impact it can have to patient care. I think all valid questions and all valid concerns that the staff would have. The instruction is you want it to draft a one-page memo that acknowledges their questions, outlines the support for resources, and emphasizes long-term benefits. And 4, it includes a clear timeline. And you also want it to use a warm and supportive tone. One of those sub-elements I talked about earlier that many prompts include is the tone that you want the AI to provide. It could be warm, supportive. It could be clear and direct. It could be confident. It could be strong. It could be assertive. Whatever tone you want to provide, I think, will help ensure that it's speaking on your behalf in the tone that you would like it to speak from. And here we're providing with an example. And this example is really more of a starting point. Open with something like, I've seen your questions about the upcoming transition, and I'd like you to know that your success is our priority. And in this case, it's one example. It's probably going to start with that and then just move from there. So you're giving it a starting point with this kind of example. So we're going to move on to the next example here. And this one we'll use in some techniques that we're going to show later on. But this one is you're a clinical researcher coordinating a multi-site study at an academic medical center. The IRB continuing review is due Wednesday on March 6th at 5 p.m. Missing it risks a lapse in IRB approval and a pause on enrollment. These are the instructions. You can do instructions as a paragraph or bulleted points. This is what it's asking you to do. Write a short message asking for sites enrollment totals, deviations, and any new AEs. You want it to be a short paragraph. You want a specific call to action that is made explicit. And you want it to end by repeating the deadline so that there's less of a risk that it's not met. You want an urgent but calm and accountable and direct tone. And you want it to be in an easy to read format. And again, you're giving it the example here. With this example, and we'll see this in a bit, sometimes it's best not to give it the example. Sometimes you want the AI to kind of give it its best shot at giving its own interpretation of what you're asking for. And then you could use your subsequent prompts and your subsequent chats to kind of massage its response to be more what you want. And another pro tip that I always use here is once you get the data that you're looking for, and if you know you're going to have to reuse, ask it again for that data maybe over and over again or a couple of times, what I do is I do kind of a recursive prompting where I've gotten what I wanted from the AI agent. So then I ask, what is one prompt I could use to get here faster the next time? And it'll actually generate the prompt for you. So I do use AI to help me write my own prompts that I could then reuse later as well, especially if I'm finding that I have to have all these different interactions. And that helps greatly with limiting your use of the context window. So let me just unshare my screen here for a second. I'm actually going to copy and paste this. I don't think it'll let me do it here. Nope, it did not. So let's see. Can I stop? Discard. And I'm going to paste that into the chat for you all to use. Okay. Do this here, everyone. Okay. So this way you can copy and paste it as we're going here. So let's continue. Okay. So some prompt techniques. There are well-known, well-researched prompt techniques that help to elevate your responses. One of them is called zero-shot prompting. This gives the AI no examples. It's a simple and straightforward with a clear ask, a clear instruction. It's called zero shot because you're giving it zero shots. You're giving it no examples. It's essentially how most of us interact with AI on a day-to-day basis. Simple example would be list 5 benefits of regular exercise. It's how we've all known and have interacted with AI, probably, hopefully, maybe up until now. It's fast, it's simple, it's what most of us do today. But it may not match your exact style or formatting needs. You're not really telling it much, and that's part of why this can fall short. You're relying very heavily on the AI and its own internal, I'll say, reasoning to be able to give you the response as accurate as you want it to be. So it's fast, it's simple, it's quick, and it works many times, but it also has its limitations. Well, if there's zero-shot prompting, then we have one-shot prompting, which is reflective of the examples I've been showing you so far. This provides one example of what you might want. And this is where you have a very clear model or format in mind that it must meet, that it has to provide to you, and the response has to be formatted towards. So if you give it a list of specific data and you're asking it to reformat in a very specific way, you could use one-shot prompting so that it doesn't reason, it just adheres to that format. This is when there is clear and no ambiguity in the context and it meets the formatting needs. The problem is that one example must match exactly what you want. If there's any deviation in there, if it has to make any decisions based off of the data, if the data doesn't follow or doesn't clearly adhere to the example, then it can start to deviate from that example slightly and make its own decisions, or it'll just try to fit it into that model that you're providing, and the output might not be what you're expecting. And so this really only works if you know that the data fits into that model, into that format, into the aesthetic that you're asking for perfectly. It is a good and accurate prompt, but that is the one drawback of a prompt like a one-shot prompt. Then there's few-shot prompting. So few-shot prompting is where you provide a 2 to 5 example. I think that's the sweet spot that you'll read in the research article. Anything more than that, I think, is unnecessary, but 2 to 5 is pretty good. I think even closer to 5 is probably gets it to be a little more accurate. And this is used when you have complex patterns, classifications, or consistent styles across multiple outputs. So just a quick example, here are 3 examples of how we categorize incidents. Example 1, example 2, example 3. Now categorize these incidents the same way, and you could provide the incidents through an upload, or you could provide it through the prompt itself. This helps to train the AI in real time on your specific needs while still allowing it to adjust intelligently. So if you have it 3 examples, it could pick one based off of the data that it's given. It could model itself off of one that maybe meets all criteria, or one that best meets the most of the criteria that's provided in all the examples. So it's able to do some level of thinking on its own and provide you with a more flexible response. The problem here is that it can pick the wrong pattern. It's more effort to set up, and the AI can get confused if those patterns deviate from each other drastically. So if the examples that you're giving are very, very different, then it might not see the connection, or it might not know which one to choose, and therefore it's going to guess. And that's the only problem, or one of the problems with few-shot prompting, is sometimes the examples can conflict. Also, what I didn't state here is, again, keep in mind your context window. If you're providing these long, large examples, you're eating away at the number of tokens allowed within a context window. And if you're anticipating a long chat, especially if you're giving it a lot of data that it has to categorize, then it's going to start forgetting some of that data as you get deeper into your chat. So the last technique we're going to share here is called chain of thought prompting. This is where you ask AI to show its work and reasoning steps. This is used for complex problems, calculations, categorizations, decision-making, especially if there's multi-factors in those decisions. You want it to show you all the factors and the reasoning that it used to get to the end result. What I've noticed in more recent agents is that it does show you the reasoning. You could expand this little bubble that it has, and it kind of shows you the reasoning that it took. But that reasoning was always happening anyway, right? It's always going to do some kind of reasoning. If you tell it to do some reasoning, like phrases such as "walk me through your logic," it'll walk you through it in real time, and it'll actually have a more in-depth and more complex reasoning model that it will then show you. So that will change. It's a little bit different than what they're doing today. And it helps you verify the reasoning, catch errors, and it teaches you the thought process that it went through. And you're able to adjust it through future prompting, to help modify it. So you can tell it, this reasoning is incorrect. Can you please adjust it and give it the right information? Or can you please try this approach? And this way it kind of helps get you to the result that you're looking for. But it can also create the illusion of reliability. If you don't do that check, if that reasoning is incorrect and you don't catch it, then your end result will seem reliable and you'll have everything to back it up. But if they went wrong in one area, if there was this hallucination where maybe it picked a low percentage response or token that geared it on a wrong track, and you don't catch that, it can present the reliability of a wrong response. And again, chain of thought prompting does take up a lot more tokens in the context window because it's providing you with a much longer response. So keep that in mind. Sorry, my throat's getting a little dry. And then the last thing here, we talk about this as being the last technique. There's a sub-technique of chain of thought prompting. And you could use these 5 magic words. Instead of using things like "walk me through your logic," there's actually research been done on the words "let's think step by step." This pushes the AI to show its work. It's breaking problems into steps and reduces careless mistakes. It is a step-by-step of what can the step-by-step can still be wrong and sound convincing, but it's useful for things like math, logic, multi-step classifications, decision makings. All of these things help, and it's actually been proven that using the words "let's think step by step" actually increases the accuracy of your prompt. There's 2 measures that many prompt researchers use. There's one that's called multi-arith or multi-arithmetic, and that is for multi-step math problems. And using the phrase "let's think step by step" can increase it from about 18% to about 80% or just under 80% accuracy. And there's another one called the GSM-8K, which is grade school math 8 through K, and these are used, but they could be all different kinds of reasoning related prompts that you're doing. It doesn't have to be math problems. Any kind of reasoning prompt that you're doing in terms of analysis or calculation or categorization, this works on all those different types of prompts and asks of the AI. And using the words "let's think step by step" could actually increase the accuracy based off of the GSM-8K metric from about 10% to about 40%, or by about 40%. So it's really proven that using these words really do improve the accuracy and the effectiveness of your prompt. So we have about 15 minutes left. I know the chat has been buzzing and I haven't had a chance to keep up with it, but that does end the presentation. So I am now open to questions. Anybody have any questions at all?
We've gotten quite a few. I'm just going through it. Some of them have been answered, but we can go through some as well. One question I thought was really interesting was whether capitalizations affect your prompts in Copilot. I had like responded because I was under the assumption that a lot of LLMs can denote emphasis on words that are in all caps, and Josh did confirm that, but I don't know if you had a take on that as well, John.
Yeah, so I'll say things like formatting and punctuation do affect it to some degree. So it shows that if it's just a normal capitalization, like if you miscapitalized a word or capitalized or didn't capitalize the word that was supposed to be, no, that doesn't affect it. But if you have something in all caps, it does understand emphasis. It understands the exclamation point or all caps, or if they have formatting bold, or if you're doing things in bullet points or things like that. Yes, that does affect the prompt, and it does understand that you are emphasizing a specific point, and it draws more attention to that point.
We did get a question from James about whether IRB permission is required to ask Copilot to analyze de-identified research data. James, I'll actually send it to the group because a few people have asked me to send it to everybody. The answer is it depends. I'm actually in conversation with someone from our research informatics team. So I'll send the information about how to use AI for IRB, the IRB approval process. And if you have any questions, I'll put where else you should go to answer your questions about specific use case scenarios.
I would always be careful. Just a quick disclaimer. Even with Copilot, although it is HIPAA compliant, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong there. Always be careful when you're entering in HIPAA data, private data, PHI data, proprietary data. So if you're entering in research data or anything in AI, just know that depending on the configurations, it is being saved by that companies, by Microsoft or by OpenAI's databases. Now, if we've configured it where it's not happening, that's different. So always adhere to the rules, regulations, and policies of the organization that owns the data that you're providing. That's the disclaimer there. But one thing to note, and I've seen this before in examples in my learning, is that AI uses the data that you're entering it to also train it in the future. We may have turned that off, or we may have configured that so it doesn't happen for Copilot, but other agents do that, especially ones that are publicly available. And there are ways where you could actually break that, and that you can kind of jailbreak the AI, and some of that data, mostly randomly, can get presented in a response. So just be careful a little bit when you're entering in data that you're unsure should be made publicly available.
There's a question about whether our version of Copilot at Weill Cornell is learning from our questions and prompting. Does that mean the more I use it, the more it gets smarter for us or for our organization?
I think that's a Josh question. I have a guess there, but Josh, I don't know if you could answer that.
Yeah, sure. So just to highlight what you said previously, we do not, when you're signed in with your WCM credentials, which is the critical part of this, right? You have to make sure you're signed in with WCM. When you are, nothing gets trained on the Microsoft perspective, which is why it's safe for PHI, right? So Microsoft doesn't know anything. It's only, connected to your account. It's the same as adding something to your OneDrive at that point, right? So make sure you're signed in with WCM and you are safe to use, high risk data according to our current policies. Obviously, all that's subject to change, so keep an eye on your inbox if you see any, changes with any of that. But current state, you're totally fine to use corporate Copilot for sensitive information. And the second question on the learning, related to that, no, Copilot does not use your prompts to train the model itself, but it can store some memory about you that I've been answering on a couple different people in chat. So memory isn't like it just remembers everything you've ever asked in a file, and it's actively like big brothering you in a way. That's not what memory is. It kind of just picks up on key things like John was mentioning in this presentation, right? Like maybe you prefer a friendlier response, or maybe you prefer a more formal response, or maybe it understands that you are this role and will try to frame it for that role. So when I ask it questions, it's like, knowing you're a product manager of Microsoft 365, this is probably how you want the response to look, versus if I was just a user of 365, right? It sends me links to the admin center because it assumes that I have access to things like that, right? Rightfully so. So memory doesn't necessarily mean it knows everything that you've ever said in a prompt ever. It just kind of picks up on key things like, hey, I prefer bullet points instead of reading long paragraphs, stuff like that. So in that way, yes, it's learning, and the more you use it, the more I think you'll enjoy its responses, or approve of its responses. But it's not that it's learning everything you've ever typed into it.
I just want to call out a couple things. I was reading the chat while Josh was providing his response. There are a few things, techniques that I didn't share here because they're not really, they're just things that I just have learned to do in the past. And Noah Wegner actually called one of them out. Oftentimes, if I want AI to do something for me and I'm unclear about all the different ins and outs or the risks or anything like that, I actually ask it to respond back to me with questions. Is there anything else you need to know if you're trying to do this analysis? Is there anything, other context that I haven't given you? And it usually gives me this whole long list of things that it would be helpful for it to know, for it to provide a more accurate response. So no, that is a great tip there. I'll call it a pro tip, where you can just ask the AI to ask you questions back, and you answer those questions, and it gives you a much more accurate response. What I also do is, when we're talking about memory, is a lot of our AI tools, including Copilot, you can create agents, or in ChatGPT, you create little, I think, projects, they call it. I'm not sure what Claude calls it. And those projects could have its own set of memory. And I've started to use what I used to call master prompts. So a master prompt is one prompt that I would always give my chat at the top that told it everything it needed to know. This is who you're acting as. This is the tone that you're going to do. This is context I'm going to give you. And then everything else I asked it to do afterwards, it knew already what I wanted to know, and I was able to do it. So for example, I could use a master prompt of, you are a project manager with 15 years experience working at an academic medical institute. You're working on these projects. This is some information about the projects. This is some deadlines of the projects, like different things. And this is the tone I wanted to use. And so I would always put that at the top of the prompt, and then I'd be able to proceed knowing that it was going to have that in its memory because I just put it there. But now you could actually put that in the configuration. So when you're creating agents, when you're creating projects, they usually have this field where it says, are there instructions for this project, for this agent? You put that on there, and then all the different chats within that project or within an agent will always have that there for you to refer back to, and it'll always know in memory that that is who you are and that's who you want it to be. So those are two quick things: is the master prompt and being able to kind of infer and ask it on itself to reflect on the prompt they were giving it, and if it's anything wrong or anything missing, or that it would need to know any more information. So can you explain again why knowledge might not be current to today and what that means for our prompts? Yeah, so agents are trained on data from the internet, but when they release the new models, they're only trained up to a certain point. So many people are showing that the LLM that they have access to, let's just call it GPT maybe 5. GPT-5 has data up through October of 2024. GPT 5.2 might have data all the way up through September of 2025. So they keep training it, but when they release it, it's always a point in time cutoff. And if you want to know when that cutoff is, just ask it, what is your cutoff date or what is your knowledge cutoff date? And you'll know. And so this way, you know if it has what data it has access to and what data it needs to go out to the web to grab for you. So Danny, I hope I answered that question. Just looking through this. How good is Copilot compared to Claude or GPT? What level is the Cornell version of Copilot? Good is relative. Different. You can even. I've asked AI this many times. I even asked ChatGPT this. That's the one I used to use. It depends on what you're using it for. I don't know all the different. I'll say advantages of the different agents and tool sets, but I know that ChatGPT is actually really good at analyzing data and providing a good analytical response. Whereas sometimes I use Perplexity if I know it has to go out to the web and search data and analyze that data it's searching and provide it back. Gemini is really good at analyzing large sets of data because it has a larger context window. So honestly, in terms of good, I think it's relative, and I would say just go to the internet, do a Google search, or ask AI itself what the different models and what the different AI tools are best suited for, and you will get a good response. No, so Carrie, good question. I tried to do this, and they don't really have a lot of self-awareness. But do AI agents notify you that the context window has been exceeded? It doesn't. And I've asked it to, and it won't. It usually kind of fights back and says it can't do that or it doesn't know that. So to me, that seems like they don't have a lot of self-awareness of their context window. Maybe that's changed since I've tried it, but I haven't gotten an AI agent to actually tell me when the context window has been exceeded. A couple things I've tried though is if I've purchased, say, an audiobook or a digital book, or if I have a long document that I'm asking it to summarize, I've actually seen it stop summarizing at a certain point because it couldn't get the whole thing. It actually couldn't. It exceeded the window, so it didn't know if the document was 100 pages long and it had 13 sections, it would summarize 1 through 10 and would leave off the rest. Or sometimes, depending on the agent, it would summarize 3 through 13 and leave off 1 and 2. So there's ways to tell as you start to get closer to it, but no, it doesn't really tell you explicitly. Ron, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I can unmute Ron. There we go. Ron, you should be able to come on the mic.
All right, I'm sorry, just one real quick. Thank you so much, by the way. This has been incredible. I'm really, really grateful for this. I've learned a ton. Just one quick question. That was the tail end of my last question was our version of Copilot, is it just basic or like I'm trying to figure out what version the Cornell one. I know it's paid, but I see that little upgrade thing and it makes me think perhaps we just have the basic one. I'd be curious to know which one Cornell has. And so if I purchase one personally, I know that I'm not wasting my money and then getting something, I would say, higher than Cornell's. But yeah, I'd really be interested to know what version of Copilot we have in terms of levels.
Josh, I'll leave that to you.
I was hovering over unmute, but I didn't want to step on your toes.
No.
So good question. And for clarity, the upgrade option is just to upgrade to the version that John's testing for us here today, which is the M365 Copilot. The only difference between that and the one that everybody has today is the connection to our personal data, right? So asking it things like, what was the last conversation I had with John Chalet? Summarize it because I have a meeting coming up with him. Things like that is possible with the M365 Copilot. It just connects to what's called your Microsoft Graph, which is all the information Microsoft knows about you, all your files, all your emails, all your Teams messages, all that fun stuff, right? That is coming. It is not available yet. It's coming in the future. It's super powerful. We're testing it. It's awesome. I recommend it when it comes out, but that's kind of what the upgrade button is asking you to do. And if you click on that, it just goes to my team and we cannot accommodate that at this time. So that's not going to help. The general answer for what version is it Microsoft does not have their own LLM, right? So it is using, I believe, ChatGPT 5 still currently, but it is going to actually use things like Claude and other models as well in upcoming releases. So you do have the paid version, if you will, if you are signed in with your Microsoft account, your corporate account. Keep in mind, web search is disabled, so there is that. If you need to do anything with web search, as long as it's not, sensitive information, you can use whatever service you like. But for corporate purposes, especially if it's sensitive information, you can use the included version, and it is the latest and greatest models that Microsoft has. There is no upgrade as far as performance, if you will.
Thanks, guys.
Does that answer your question?
Oh, sorry. Um,
I know you're about to close this off, Vanessa. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to just ping me offline. I would love to answer anything that I can. Anything I can, I'm probably just going to refer to Josh anyway. Looking at the chat, there's a lot of questions here that I do want to be able to respond to, but I know we're over time.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I know that we are at the end and there are still a few questions. What I'm hoping to do, and if you, John and Josh, don't mind, I can send you the chat log so you have all the questions, and I can try to send the follow-up maybe tomorrow or later this week, just so I can make sure that all of these questions are answered and, provide you guys with any links or guides to kind of help answer your questions or steer you in the right direction when it comes to using Copilot or any other LLM. I do want to thank Josh and John so much for joining us today. I know Josh was kind of like a last minute addition. John, thank you for your presentation. Really great information. And I'll be sure if you have those slides that you want to share, John, feel
Yes.
free to send them over to me and I'll pass it along to everybody else. Thank you guys for joining us. I know we went a little over, but I appreciate you taking the time to learn more about prompt engineering. And hopefully you'll join us next week. We're going to be doing a session during Patient Safety Week about some tips for Epic. So if you or anyone you know are interested in joining that, I'll be sending out the information later this week and hope to see you then. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you.